Hello and welcome to the Dash Podcast. I am your host, Trey Gamage, and I've got a special episode because Dr. Chris Reese is returning to join us on the Dash Podcast. We had a conversation earlier in the season. We discussed a lot of great things about how culture should be driving your instruction. Now today we've got some more phenomenal conversation for you. And before I get into that, I want to make sure that you remember that every decision counts. 8 Lessons I Wish They Taught Me in School is out right now. And you can buy your copy at treygamage.com, go to Amazon or any other book retailer to purchase this book. It's a social and emotional learning workbook for middle and high school students. You can use it for explicit, direct SEL instruction. You can use it for your refocus intervention, or just buy it for your family member to read at the house. Other than that, I'm ready to get started with this conversation with Dr. Reese because we've got a lot to get to today. How are you, sir?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me again.
No problem. No problem. It was a pleasure. I think your first episode actually, it changed the way that I do some things and really helped me kind of to push that message for culture to be driving instruction rather than content. And
Yes,
I think
sir.
that's the point of SEL too, right? Is not to coddle our students and our young people, but really give them the skills that they need to manage and deal with the problems that we're going through. So I appreciate our first conversation, and I know this one's going to be just as good.
Yes, sir. Let's talk.
You're at a new school this year, and you've got some changes going on. And at the same time, Dr. Reese, we've got teachers running for the hills. There's so many people changing careers. We don't necessarily treat this profession as a profession. We don't treat our teachers like professionals. We hold our teachers to the highest of all standards, but we do not pay them that way. We do not treat our teachers that way. What's going on with that?
I used to joke to a lot of people about leaving education and going to work at Delta Airlines. And I used to say, at least I will get a reasonable salary.
Wow.
And free flights. And one of my colleagues actually joked and said, you'd actually do better working at Target because we have to wear some sort of uniform, whether it be flexible or not, at work anyway. And so you might as well put on a red polo shirt and some khaki pants, take your walkie-talkie, become the manager, and still make the same salary that you would make leading a classroom, and at times even more.
Yeah.
I have friends who have lower degrees, and they make bonuses that we can't even imagine getting in a year in education.
Wow.
And so there's a prestige that is socially connected to educating, but no one wants to follow through with what it takes in order to keep you just in the classroom. We all know that if you pay people more, they'll take a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we have asked teachers to become more than teachers at this point. They're counselors, psychologists, paper trail masters. They are doing so much more than just standing in front of the classroom and giving instruction, that there has to be some accountability in our local, state, and national government where we compensate educators for the hard work that they are doing. There are even school districts where the administrators, and I'm an administrator so I can speak this language, are gifted with certain bonuses and opportunities if their schools perform. But what about the teachers?
Right.
We need them to stay in the classrooms. At this point in Georgia, there is such a shortage for educators that there is a plight to ask retired assistant principals to come back and serve as special education teachers. Where that might be beneficial, and I agree with their presence being in the building because there's a level of experience that they bring that is remarkable. Why aren't we able to hire and retain educators in Georgia? And so that's going to take explicitly looking at what we're offering, how we value the degrees that they bring into the building, what we do to keep them, the attitudes that we put before them, even the evaluation system, which we know is fair. I think that our TEAC system in Georgia is quite fair when we evaluate teachers, and every state has its own practice for that. But what is that connected to? If I am a quality teacher every year for 10 years, what's going to be the benefit of that? And everybody doesn't have the dream of becoming an administrator. Some people find their value in the classroom and don't intend to leave there. And it should be just as profitable to continue teaching as it is to progress up the career ladder in education. And so it's something that we need to consider. I'm looking at the social constraints of teaching in my current building, where my teachers are overwhelmed with paperwork for accommodations, whether that be 504s or IEPs. And there are almost meetings, because we're such a small staff and in a connected magnet school program, that they could meet every single day after school.
Mm.
Where is the room for tutoring students who are struggling, or having the opportunity to make it home
Yeah.
due to daylight savings time to the park before they go to bed, to spend time with family, or even have dinner with family without having to worry about what paperwork is due and I must grade this because people are waiting on the grade to pop up. There's no flexibility in that. And here is the problem I have with it. In college classrooms, that model exists already. I have been teaching as an adjunct at West Georgia for 4 years now, and not one time have I had to go to consistent meeting structures. I think I've been to 3 meetings in the 4 years.
Yeah.
There's no consistent paperwork being due throughout the semester. If there's an accommodation that must be followed, it's provided to me in the beginning of the semester. I sign for it, I read it, I implement it, and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
I am able to teach, create my syllabus, decide what my students need to learn, how they've mastered the information when they leave. And if that works for college classrooms, and the goal of K-12 is to align students for preparation for both college and career life, then it shouldn't be difficult to revise all of the expectations that we have, that we place on teachers, that is overwhelming them.
Yeah.
But I believe it's connected, honestly, to assessments. State assessments and testing has caused us to go haywire in our governmental system. And it's causing the school districts to have to meet those expectations. And that pressure is not sitting at the top of those organizations. It's falling down into the classrooms. And now teachers are saying, hey, I can't deal with this. I can go make the same salary somewhere else. It's unfortunate. But in order for us to go back and pull teachers back in, there's going to have to be an incentive-based process and some morality changes in our leadership structure, so that we're able to convince them that this is the career for them, so that we can continue to serve our children.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot. That's a whole lot to tackle there. And you know, I feel you on the college aspect. It's really easy to teach. It's really easy to teach at the adjunct level.
Right.
Like you said, I haven't. I taught my first semester of Com 101. Like you said, they wanted one assessment from me. You know, they wanted one recap of one speech that they did. You know, I had a few little structures, but got to create all that myself. Where do you think, like, what age should that start? Should it be high school, middle school, elementary? Like, at what point can you trust teachers in the K-12 level to be able to facilitate their curriculum or those standards on their own?
Definitely high school, but I think there should be an intentional plan and structure built from elementary school all the way up, so that we're not just throwing a dodgeball at no one. No one's there to play the game with us.
Right.
Um, that's unfair to the teachers who are teaching and the students who are learning. I was talking to someone the other day, Dr. Angela Woods, and I mentioned to her that I am bothered by the fact that middle schools don't technically mirror high schools.
Mm.
There are some middle schools who are still walking students in line. Elementary school, great. You're walking in line, you're teaching them structure, order, organization, behaving well. You're putting all of those pieces together. Wonderful. So now we ask, why is ninth grade such a transition year? And you'll see all of these school districts throw all of this money and resource toward ninth grade programs, even creating ninth grade academies, to see can they aid students in the transition to high school. Well, the problem is you left eighth grade in line. And so if you left eighth grade in line and the bell rings the first day of high school, you don't know how to get to class on your own within 7 minutes. If all of your classes were next door to each other in eighth grade, you don't know how to walk to the other building and go straight to class, or get to your locker in time in order to make sure you have time to go to the restroom and go to class. That's a lot of transition and change for a child.
Absolutely.
It's necessary, but we can solve that by making sure that each and every level models the intention in which we want students to go toward. So if that be the case, if high school is our area before we take them to college, then high school classrooms in some way, particularly in the way we deliver curriculum, should mirror what we're doing in college classrooms.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. I think the other benefit or other point that you brought up in your opening statement, if you will, is that what's the benefit of being a quality teacher? Why
Hmm.
why should I go home and grade these papers? Why should
Hmm.
I submit my lesson plans? Why should I be on this committee? Why should I join this team? Why should I follow this rubric? I'm not being incentivized for any of it. I have expectation from A to Z, and my pay stops at B. Why would I keep doing the rest of these expectations if there's no um, explicit reward or even implicit reward for following through?
Right. And the funny thing is, there may be places, particularly charter schools, where they have incentive-based programs,
Yeah.
but we know that there is no program that exists that fully gives teachers exactly what they deserve based on their performance and the hard work they do. And I also want to bring up one major point about that too, because I want to make sure I cover all sides of that conversation. This is another thing I always say, and I mean, this blew my mind when I said it to myself, but when I say it out loud, I feel some confidence in it. There are teachers who are gifted to teach students who struggle.
Yes.
They may never have the highest scores in their building.
Absolutely.
Never.
Wow.
There are teachers who, I'm gonna just say it explicitly, suck. They don't have any strategies, they don't have any plan, any intention to do well, and they're giving students who perform well or test well, and they may have the highest scores in the building every single year. So you can't base the incentive based on how my students perform, because if I've agreed to teach the students that nobody else will teach, I'll never show you
Mm,
on paper that they're the highest students in the
mm.
building, but I can show you that they're beating their own record, that they are increasing their own strategies, that they're using their own ability to grow within their own selves, their own selves. So you may see one child come in reading on a third grade level, and this is sixth grade. But if I can get this child to read on a fourth grade level, that's progression.
Mhm.
But why should that teacher be excluded from incentive-based opportunities
Mm.
because that child is not reading on a seventh grade level?
Wow. And that kind of, I think that translates across tiers, if you will. Same for students. That gets into the barrier to entry conversation. If I'm teaching in a area that I love and I really want to work with these kids, but I'm not able to receive the same rewards or recognition because there's too many barriers, there's too many hurdles. If I need 80% efficiency, and my class is at 35% right now. Is that really going to happen? It's a
Right.
versus achievement question. What do you? I think that's a good segue to ask. What do you think are some of the misconceptions for teachers and parents when it comes to success in schools and how we're working towards that?
I had a parent tell me uh, that we were no longer competing because we were no longer the number 19 school. We were number 16 at that time. We were no longer the number 16 school in the nation
Mm,
for one of the polls that we existed on. You all regressed, and so you all are not working hard. What are you going to do about that? I mean, that was a boiling question. I cannot tell you how far that got under my skin. Because who's to say we're no longer number 16 because another school decided to compete with us?
right.
Everybody wants to be somewhere in the number. And so who's to say that numbers 17, 18, and 19 didn't decide this is the year that we're really going to give that school a hard time, and we're going to work just as hard and harder than they work in order to ensure that we move up the ladder. So both of us cannot be number 16. Someone has to move to 17. And so when the school behind us performed harder this coming year, or whatever conditions allowed them to have a higher score, could have been just better testers
Yeah.
that grew up into the next school year. A lot of conditions are built into that. Parents and sometimes even teachers look at data as the same data you're looking at for 2017, 18, and 19 are the same students.
Mm-hmm.
That is not trend data. So
Mm.
if we take an exam, for example, the senior exam for most students in Georgia is economics. It's a 12th grade exam.
Right.
If you look at the data for class of 2017, you'll see their data. 18, you see class of 18 data. 19, you see class of 19 data. You're not looking at a trend within the school.
Mm-hmm.
There are different students with different conditions, different situations. You can't say that year to year, this is what's happening to the very same students in economics, because all of those 3-year spans have different students.
Exactly.
Another misconception is when we look at graduation rate. Most teachers think that graduation rate contributes to who is graduating right now. And it does not. Georgia particularly looks at graduation rate in a 4-year and 5-year cohort.
Mm.
So if we're in the class of 2020, then we're analyzing the data from, let's say, class of 2016.
Yeah.
But it takes that 4 years to determine whether those students have gone on, started, completed, done something in college, gone straight to career. It's hard to follow exactly what they're doing beyond our school and whether they actually graduated in time in the schools that they may have transferred to or from. So they are looking at the data saying, oh man, this year, graduation rate, they got them out of there. They leaving this year, class of 2020. And we're not going to look at class of 2020 until 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as a state, as a district, as a national government, as we communicate data, we do need to be a little bit more specific about what the data means so that people won't have these misconceptions about what they're reading. Because when they create their own narrative, it's harder to break down the narrative that they've created than to present them the truth of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one misconception. I want to bring up access and equity. Sometimes there's this misconception that schools who perform lower, that if they had higher parental engagement, that it would contribute to the success of their school. So where I agree with that, and it's a high contribution, you need parental involvement. It's really important. Higher performing schools may argue that high parental involvement is distracting. It's not involvement, period. It's
Right.
what type of involvement are you asking for?
Mm.
We're asking you to be more involved in your own child's life, not set up 20 meetings with the teachers. That's not involvement. That's borderline annoying.
Well, I heard, I actually had a meeting with the teacher the other day, and he was saying, I wish some parents would ask their child, what happened, what did you learn in school today, not what happened in your class today.
Yes.
And
yes, I agree with that.
And then you end up getting, what happened? Oh, that happened, that happened, that happened. Well, where was your teacher? I need to set up a meeting. Let me come to the school. What did you learn, though?
Oh, man.
What did you
my friends and I talk about all the time that, particularly on the south side of the tracks, if something happens, if a teacher said something to a child, the parent's argument is, I'm going to be up there first thing in the morning. You've probably heard it before.
Yeah.
But what exactly are you going to do first thing in the morning? Number one, the teacher is teaching.
Yeah.
And do you really expect me to remove the teacher from 27 other kids so that we could talk about the fact that your child was offended because there was a 0 put in the grade book because your child did not turn in their homework?
And that's and we're gonna get off on a tangent, but I want to stay on our access and equity because you're absolutely right in that there's a change too, and that's when the parent involvement becomes more of a distraction. When if I do oblige to your concern and I remove my student from class or remove that teacher from class, how long is that meeting going to be? Is that 45 minutes without instruction? Is that we're taking, our parents may be taking the side of their kids too much, not trusting what's happening in the classroom. And I think, like you said, that goes along with the access and equity the education level or um, the career path or whatever, what factors from these parents are impacting the kids in class and that access and equity. I think that determines what your engagement with your parents should look like. If I've got parents that are mature enough to come in and really support the school, support my reading coach, support us when we're testing, that's great involvement. But if I've got parents that are only coming to school to complain or tell me what you don't like, then now it's a distraction. And I'm having to be forced to put out these fires instead of look at ways that we can continue to improve on our access, our equity, and bridge some of these gaps in growth for our students.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, kind of staying on the access and equity argument too. I want to make sure I mention that as I do job interviews for teachers year by year, there are teachers who leave college with a list of schools that they're only interested in.
Mm.
And they have no intention of applying or being accepted to one of the schools that they would consider bad. Just going to say it. We had a student teacher once who was serving in my 99% African American school, who was assigned to be there, but had no intention of applying there or any schools on that side of town.
Mm-hmm.
What he learned was that our students aren't as bad as he had assumed, and that our teachers were teaching. So one misconception is that there is less of teaching going on in schools that I served, such as this one with 99% African American students and a 90% African American staff, that there was a lack of teaching occurring. And that was never the case.
Mm-hmm.
I see more teaching there at times than I've seen in other schools who are considered to be high performing.
Right.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that the teachers in high performing schools are working hard as well,
Right.
because there's a different type of work that occurs there.
They're independent.
However, right. What's that again?
They're independent of each other.
They're independent of each other. Correct. And so my thoughts are that as we look at what schools need and what they're doing, you can't compare them at all. The equity piece is concerning to me when it's institutionalized. If you know a school has a problem with heat and air, then address that.
Yeah.
Because in some schools, the parents just aren't playing that.
Yeah.
That shouldn't even be a conversation. Every single school should be filled with heating and air without a problem.
Yeah.
I noticed that there are schools who are higher performing in some areas of Georgia where they are fully equipped. And if they find themselves at capacity, then the plan to put them on the next SPLOST budget to build them a new facility or expand their campus is almost automatic.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen schools where, there's a high population of Latino students where trailers are added, but there's no real plan to expand their campus or rebuild them a new facility. That's the equity piece and access to quality resources that I'm concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my district particularly, whatever's available to one school is often available to all of the schools. However, if you do not know exactly what to ask for, you won't get it.
Yeah. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem because if you look at a rural, just take I know you're in a bigger city like Atlanta, but when I look here in a rural community like I have in here in South Carolina, we have some of the very, very same issues. I think South Carolina, there's a dramatic teacher shortage. I think of over 60,000 teachers. And we have, so charter schools, I heard somebody say, charter schools wouldn't exist if everything in public schools were going right. But then you start a new school, or even if you're at a failing school, I mean, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And if I don't know the question to ask, how are my resources helping me to be guided in the right direction? Now, I know that you recently had a transition from, a lower performing school or, a school on the other side of the tracks. And now you're at a school that's a more prodigious magnet school of the arts. How have you seen some of the problems of access and equity translate over between those two demographics?
So the school that I previously served had an intentional leader. She was very, very knowledgeable about what was available to students, and she would capitalize on that. Here lies the comparison as well, though. The school I served was a Title I school.
Mm-hmm.
So there were already certain advantages that came with having the amount of students that we had, servicing students who had some sort of accommodation in any way. It was easier to look at what we needed and ask for what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
However, and because we, did well in athletics and we performed as well as we could academically, there were some perks that came with that.
Yeah.
However, the school that I'm currently serving in is in an older building and it needs more, but the parent community and the teacher community doesn't see it as pressing as the students needed at the previous school.
Interesting.
So their focus is more so on that in which you can see. Because it's a performing arts school, parents are really into the performances. They really like the fact that there is always something going on and that there's ticket sales that get sold out. They're into that part.
Mm-hmm.
But the facility in itself doesn't necessarily feed to the programmatic needs that we have.
Mm.
So what ends up being the problem, though, is that we'll have them complain about the facility, but everyone knows that it's only going to be a temporary argument.
Right.
At some point, there will be something else that occurs that will either be good or questionable that will take their attention off of the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm saying this as safely as possible, but I'm getting to a point where I'm just saying it now. The school where I'm currently serving, there are needs, but those needs are going to be met if the parent community stays focused on what they want.
Mm.
The other community could make as much noise as they want, but because the previous leader is no longer there and serving in a different capacity, they may not get the same resources. And so I am concerned because one school is super high performing, the other is pretty average. But if that be the case for the average school, then what's really happening for the lower performing schools?
Wow.
If there's a gap in between what they have and what they need at this point, then a school that is at its lowest might not have a chance.
Yeah.
And what will happen is, I think in multiple states, but particularly in Georgia, if you don't perform over a long period of time, then the state takes over.
Yeah.
And so part of that can be solved, to be honest with you, if we switch these teachers up. We have teachers that will stay in the same building for 15, 18, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it has been proven that you are a quality teacher and that you have something to offer, your pedagogical skill is superior, then why not go to the lowest school in the district and do the same thing that you're doing at the higher performance school?
Yeah.
But if no one requires you to do that, if that's not a part of the process from the beginning, then you're not going to sign up for that. Because I have teachers who just swear that, the South Side is so challenging. And, you and I know that on the other side of the tracks, the students, as long as you have snacks, that's all they really want from you. They want your snacks.
That's the truth.
I used to keep a bottle of cologne in my desk, and one of my students decided he just wanted to smell good all of a sudden. And I had to explain to him that, cologne don't go with must. Now you got to, balance that out. But, that's, the relational needs that they had are just different.
Yeah.
And, they're great kids too. They're just a different type of kid.
Yeah. I think when I was speaking with Ryan Clark, he was on episode 100. He made a great point after teaching in North Carolina and also in Harlem. It's almost, we almost have the same issues across the tracks, but the one side is overexposed and one side is underexposed. And I guess it might be even, a bigger picture here, but when you think about like which side of the tracks you're on, you're absolutely right. And we were talking before we got on, like with SEL, social emotional learning, we can look at that as coddling our young people, particularly in more Black and brown communities, but you can't see it that way because those kids that aren't getting some of those life skills, or they might not be getting read to at school or at home. They've got to learn how to make mistakes in a different way or deal with coping. You know, they have to cope with somebody looking at it. I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with fourth and fifth graders getting mad at each other because somebody turned their neck at them or rolled their eyes at them. You have to be able to sit down with that student first and say, "Hey, like, where did you learn this? Like, how would you feel if someone did that to you?" It's much more conversational and relational. Like you said, I've got to, at these lower performing schools, or I don't even want to say lower performing, but with Black and brown students, got to connect much more on that cultural piece before I'm going to be willing to learn from you. And I'm just going to say this because the other day I was covering a class, a sixth grade class, actually, because I had a parent that complained and the teacher had to go into that meeting. So I was with these sixth graders, did not have any plans with them, but they were focused on a lesson of respect. And one kid just started tapping on his water bottle, and he started making a beat. And I was like, well, instead of just asking you guys to turn and talk and regurgitate what you talked about respect, let's make a rap song. So I just started rhyming and dancing a little bit and made it more of a call and response. So I'd say a couple of bars and then I'd pass it to a student. Some of them were bold enough to attempt. Others was like, no, pass it back. But we had so much fun bouncing back and forth on respect, and that got them. Now they're ready to learn. Now the next thing that I'm trying to teach them, they're ready to be engaged in it because now they're excited about what they're about to do. On the other side of the tracks or a higher performing school, some of those kids are coming in ready to learn and understand the value of the education because they're at a magnet school. They're focused on these specific things, and that's just not the same case on both sides of the track, as you say.
Right. And you know what? The funny thing is, you brought up an excellent point. As you look at the social emotional learning techniques that classrooms have and that they're continually implementing, Ron Clark is doing an excellent job here in Georgia, ensuring that students have an opportunity. But I mean, his list of 55 rules, never met the guy, but I'm impressed with his work. And, you know, of course, there are educators in Georgia who are jealous of the progress that his school is having. But when you look at the general rule structure of his school, he's looking at what do we need to address socially that may not be addressed at home, that we can specifically address as a school and continue to monitor and look at how we can progress the students' opportunities based on what we do for them and show them how to do it for others.
Absolutely.
Excellent model. Excellent model.
I was fortunate to go to their teacher training at the Ron Clark Academy, and I'll ask them because he had some fifth grade students who, you know, some of the kids are high performing, gifted and talented. Some have learning disabilities, some have behavior problems. I saw these fifth grade students doing multi-step equations in May. It was at the end of the year, but I said, how did you get them to this point? And you know, you mentioned the essential 55. You teach these kids how to tie a tie, how to wash your hands, how to communicate and ask a question right, or just the really basic essential needs of life. And once you can understand and grasp like who you are and how you communicate with people, now we can build on that with whatever we need. So I think from that standpoint too, I think again, classroom management, classroom management 101, like how do you get your teachers in the position to be able to handle as an RTI or MTSS system would say, handling 80% of those behavior issues that come up in class in your classroom rather than sending them to the principal's office.
Absolutely. So I have two videos that I often share with others, and I encourage everybody out there to check them out. If you type in classroom management on YouTube, there's a guy named Mr. Hester. He has a trailer classroom, and he talks about his story in the beginning of his video. But he then goes into exactly what he does in order to ensure that classroom management begins on day one. He's standing at the door in the video with a list of his students and seat assignments. And as they're entering, he quietly tells them, "Hi, what's your name?" They tell him what their names are. And he says, "It's so nice to meet you. You're going to be seated in seat number 22. There's something for you to do on the board, and I'd like for you to be finished with it by the time I enter the room." The next thing he does as they're working, and he has a timer on the board to let them know, at the end of an assignment, he tells them that I'm going to count to 3. And on 3, I want you to hold the 2 sheets of paper up in the air and pull the staple apart, place the second sheet on your desk, and pass off the first sheet to the person behind you. After they're all on the back row, I want them passed around the back row all the way to the first row and passed to the front. And I'm going to time you to see, can you do that quicker than my other classes? From day one, there was a structure, there are expectations, there's a plan, there's a time limit. And so if he does this every single day, part of the reason teachers get stuck with, these behaviors are existing is because there's no plan to work around it. If your students are routing when they enter the classroom, then having a bell ringer up on the board can be a start to controlling those behaviors. When I was teaching, my kids used to tell each other, bell rung, bell ringer. I used to say it the first 2 or 3 weeks, and eventually they would beat me saying it.
Wow.
And that was the understanding that I don't want you standing up and walking around and talking. I want you to do the bell ringer. Let's get started. So when I come in, I'm coming in starting the class. I'm not coming in reminding you about the bell ringer. So if you explicitly outline what those expectations are and consistently enforce them, you will start to do what I enjoy seeing in every classroom: students enforcing and policing each other.
Yeah.
And particularly in, African-American classrooms, based classrooms, you look in, that first time I hear, man, do your bell ringer, he don't like that. That's positive work for me. Now we're responsible for each other. And I like to see that happen. The second video is a video way back from 1947, actually, and it's called Maintaining Classroom Discipline. There's a teacher who does it in 2 perspectives. He comes in the first time, and as students do things incorrectly, he tries to check them each time they do something wrong. And then he tells them how horrible they are in math because they didn't pass the quiz. And then he walks away, and then all sorts of behaviors take place after that. In the second video, he corrects his behavior. And instead of making noise about how bad they did, he highlights how great they did, and then gives them the tools they need and other examples to help them understand the deficiency that they had in the last assignment. He offers to support them. He walks around, he's present, he's engaged. If someone says something out of turn, he gives the attention to them instead of trying to shut them down.
Right.
As he leaves the room, a student stands up at the board and tries to throw an eraser, that's how old this is, at other students with chalk on it. When he enters the room, he catches them before they do it and say, hey, something similar to, are you trying to join the baseball team? And cracks a joke about whatever the situation was and asks the student to have a seat. And he continues doing what he's doing. If you put all of the attention on negative behaviors, we know this to be true, then you're going to find yourself entertaining those negative behaviors every day. But you have to create conditions around them that you can say, these are my expectations. If you fail to meet them, there's a time and a place for me to have that conversation with you. But what I am not going to do is stop teaching the others so that you can be entertained by it.
Yeah.
Because when you look at younger grades, some of those students don't get the attention at home. So doing things to annoy you is a way of getting attention.
Exactly.
And so those are my 2 video go-tos when it comes to managing classrooms. And I do believe that if you have a plan, that you will always overtake an opportunity. But if you have an opportunity without a plan, you have a problem.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Mr. Metaphor. I think you're absolutely right there. And what I've learned as well over the past couple of years is that right there is social and emotional learning. When you're teaching folks how to interact and how to behave in the classroom explicitly, but also implicitly at the same time. Like, you're not saying, hey, I'm going to teach you how to follow my instructions. I'm teaching you my expectations. You may say those things, but it's more about mindful behavior and handling that expectation. There's
Correct.
times you might walk into a classroom, there is no expectation, there is no objective, and there is no consistent system for consequences, rewards, or behavior infractions, and you really can't win like that. So the whole school ends up putting out those kind of fires. So that's really good. I thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Reese. And as we kind of end up closing out here, um, let's close out with some of the direction for the future of education and how we talked about earlier, kind of modeling corporate America and modernizing our education system as a whole. I know a lot of presidential campaigns are talking about this, and there just needs to be a lot of education reform. So what are your thoughts on that?
You know, we have a lot of great programs and ideas out there that work, and they work in certain classrooms, but it's almost time for us to revolutionize the way we do education right now,
Yeah.
and try to combine some of those strategies and look for the direction in which we want students to go in and align them with those expectations. So here we are. There's flipped classroom. It works. I like it, but it only works for students who have been well prepared for it. So what if you take a flipped classroom, flexible seating, and an organizational structure where students meet in a standing meeting for their start of class, and then turn that into a blended learning environment,
Mm,
all in one classroom?
mm,
We have the niches and pieces that work, but we haven't placed them together yet. And the reason why I say we need to model some corporate American structures is because you'll see those models exist in one organization. They may implement standing meetings. They may have flexible seating where your desk might be a high top table. They may have flexible arrangement where you can, use whatever space works for you, or the task that you take on today has an option based to it. And it doesn't say that you don't have expectations for all of the projects to be completed, but people learn and perform differently in the way in which they do well. And so if you allow that flexibility and you give them the structure in place that they need, then you will get the results that you need from it.
mm,
I have a teacher right now who's trying to do flipped classroom. And so we have, a combination of 8th through 12th grade in our building. And it works well for our 11th and 12th graders in mathematics because they have some type of foundational um, reference to go back to before they look at the lesson, and then they come in with questions. So it really works. But with the 8th graders, they're really struggling because they're new to the building, they're new to these strategies. And so to pre-read and come in prepared doesn't necessarily work for them.
right.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it. It just means
Mhm,
you should limit the way you try it
mhm,
and then combine it with another strategy that works. And so all I'm saying is that if we have organizational structures in place, let's look at the government, for instance.
yeah,
And if the way we do congressional meetings works in order for us to operate the government, then why can't we use some of the strategies that we see
yeah.
in those forums in our social studies classrooms so that they're applicable to the knowledge base that students need to see and learn from?
Mhm,
So the biggest thing I'm recommending is that if there's an area that we can progress their experience and open up their horizon of knowledge, then let's do that. It's hard to learn about mechanics and how to fix a car by just reading the textbook. Eventually, you want them to touch the car.
yeah,
And it would help if the room that you use them use to in order to teach mechanic and automotive work actually looked like an actual shop.
mm,
So that's why I was, a proponent and a supporter of the CTAE programs that particularly looked like the actual work that they would be doing. When I was in school, I was interested in early childhood education. So I took dual enrollment courses on my high school campus where the professor came to us. And we used a room that was built for early childhood education. So if we had parent night, we could, host babysitting or child coverage while parents went to parent conferences with the teachers. Or if they had an infant and we were having an event, we could have student teachers there with a supervisor who could help manage and maintain that learning environment for those children as their parents enjoy the event. And so I think those opportunities are important, but it's time to stretch past the CTAE programs for applicability, but to also look at our content classrooms and
mhm,
see what can we do to have them mirror the actual fields in which they represent.
yeah. And I think to kind of summarize what you just said in my head, it sounds like taking a systematic approach, and
Mhm.
that's what businesses use to run efficiently as systems. we take an innovative systems process to really, make our environments conducive for kids to learn. How would that change our education system? And that will go a long way.
It sure will. I definitely agree.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for sharing this. I'm so glad we had to have conversation number two, and I'll just let you know now. We'll be in contact again. You're gonna be a regular on the show here.
It would be my pleasure.
I love your perspective and the thoughtfulness that you put behind teaching, and you're clearly a born educator, but it's not just in talent, but in skill. You do the work as well, and I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you for your passion and hard work that you're doing and every contribution that you're making toward our children getting better opportunities and having a solid future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It's important for people to hear Black men having these conversations about education. Is there anything else that you want to say to leave with our listeners right now before we go?
Only thing I'm going to recommend is that you all follow me on Twitter. It is Bryan, Bryan, Chris Reese. And you can also find me on Instagram. It is my handle name there is uppity_African. So I'd love to hear from you and hear some of the perspectives and great things that you're doing in your classrooms and in your schools so that I can continue to help lead the force as we move toward better education strategies in our schools.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. This is the Dash Podcast, and I appreciate you so much for listening. Share this episode with your friend. Tell a friend. Follow Dr. Bryan Chris Reese. He's got so many insights, and he's open to having these conversations with everybody. And last thing, visit TreyGamers.com to purchase your copy of Every Decision Counts for your class, for your child, for your friend, or for your family. And we will see you next time. This is the Dash.